Adult content has seen something of a shift in recent-ish years. While shows for adults used to fall largely into the realms of either sitcoms like Friends or Reba or The Big Bang Theory, or drama-focused shows like Bones or Columbo or NCIS or some of the first thing that also involves a lot of murder and interpersonal conflict, the entertainment industry has seen a rise in the genre of the adult cartoon. No, not that kind of adult cartoon, put your cock away. Adult-targeted cartoons aren't new by any means. The Simpsons and Family Guy and South Park have been around for fucking decades now, and probably aren't going to die out anytime soon, but they're also not the kind I'm talking about today. Though South Park has dabbled in overarching narratives at times to poke fun at contemporary issues, adult cartoons were largely episodic and self-contained with little care for continuity or narrative focus. And obviously shows like this are still being made today, but they're not what this video is about. No, what I'm talking about is the rise of narrative-focused adult cartoons. Shows like BoJack Horseman, Disenchantment, Rick and Morty, Castlevania and Arcane. Shows that tend to handle more quote-unquote mature topics and themes via overarching narratives. And of course, we have the two shows I'd like to actually talk about today, Has-Been Hotel and Helluva Boss. Vivian Medrano's twin magnum opuses are well known and quite beloved across the internet, and I am very much on record as loving both of them. Considering I made a review of the first season of Has-Been and have talked about Helluva in a few different videos, I'm still reeling from Sinsmas and I await the arrival of Has-Been Hotel Season 2 with bated breath. So that's where I stand in all of this. But it was in watching through Sinsmas that I got caught on a thought and decided I needed to work through it in a video. And yes, I am aware Sinsmas has been out for over a month now, but I've been busy with other projects and I finally have the time to work through it. See, both Has-Been Hotel and Helluva Boss are primarily pitching their tents in the ring of adult comedy, and the thing about most adult comedy is that it's very mean-spirited. This isn't a criticism, by the way, this is just an observation. A lot of the comedy of adult cartoons, especially in the hellaverse shows, are very mean-spirited. Characters are usually violent, foul-mouthed, and massive assholes to each other. Suffering is a joke and violence is the punchline, and this is part of the appeal of the shows. The thing is though, both shows are also interpersonal character dramas with non-villain protagonists that expect us to become invested in the happiness and well-being of the cast, which I think is very interesting. See, the thing about shows like Family Guy is that you're not genuinely expected to sympathize with the cast. They exist in what TV Tropes has termed a crapsack world, where every character is an idiot, a jerk, or a butt monkey, and the enjoyment comes from watching them suffer or inflict suffering on others. With very rare exception, you're never expected to really care about the characters or feel bad for their struggles. The Helluva shows, however, are very not that. While heaven and hell and earth are all filled with assholes and the system is rigged against our nominal heroes, well, we actually have nominal heroes. We have characters we're expected to grow attached to and sympathize with and root for. We want them to succeed and earn their happy ending, whatever that looks like. But with a few notable exceptions, the characters are largely still massive assholes who mistreat the people around them and often seem to very obviously belong in hell. And so my question posed is thus, what is it that makes these characters different for us? What makes them sympathetic where the rest of the world isn't? This is a challenge that other like-minded cartoons grapple with as well, and they all overcome it in different ways. Castlevania overcomes the cynicism of its world by giving us characters like Sypha, someone who brings out the best in those around them and drives them to fight for a better world, as well as showing us that while we may be seeing the characters at their worst, they can still be better. Arcane pulls you in by being a tragedy, and I mean that in the play genre sense, not in the show could have been great if such and such sense. You're always privy to what core traits are driving the characters to their ultimate ends, and you want the best for them because they're so human and well realised, but it's always their inherent flaws that drive the story to darker places. Arcane is actually a really good modern tragedy, I should make a video on that someday. Then you have BoJack Horseman, which... okay, I think the appeal is similar to Arcane, but I just do not fucking like the show or the character. But I know it did something right. If you're a fan of BoJack, can you please let me know in the comments what it was that made it work for you? Because it was just misery after misery for me, and I'd really like to hear from someone who did enjoy it. But anyway, back on topic. Has-Been Hotel and Helluva Boss work differently to the other shows. Because they literally take place in hell, good people are a legendarily rare commodity, and outside of Charlie, basically nobody here can be considered morally good. And most media primes you to want to see bad people suffer. Watching a douchebag get their comeuppance is part of the fun of seeing the bad guys swan about on screen. So what gives? What makes us view these losers suffering as bad when, by most logic, we shouldn't? Well, I've come up with 3 different reasons. The first of which being that we as a society have kind of shifted towards showing sympathy for the devilish and demonic. I actually made an entire video on the subject, which I'll link to down below in case you'd like to give that a look. Having sympathy for the devil isn't the biggest reason I'd attribute to the show's narrative working, but I do think it's a factor. The second factor is that, in the case of Hazbin Hotel at least, the hell envisioned by Vivziepop isn't really the same as the hell we tend to imagine IRL. It functions more as an open-air prison than a pit of tailor-made, personalised torments for your every mistaken sin. Regardless of the actual sin committed, everyone is thrown into the same area and nobody actually knows what does and does not get someone entry into heaven either. So while you can definitely argue that the characters as they are now might deserve punishment, their attitudes and ongoing actions seem to have been shaped by the fact that they live in hell at all and have been forced to adapt to the harsh realities of the afterlife. They're basically victims of circumstance and have changed to survive their environment, making them far more sympathetic than they would be otherwise. I think this plays a larger role in making the emotional narrative work, but it's still not what I consider the biggest contributor to making the Helluverse shows work. No, I think the most important factor to all of this is that the shows always make sure to draw a line between mean and cruel. See, while the casts of both shows engage in some objectively pretty terrible things, I mean, IMP is literally a hitman operation acting at the behest of the aggrieved dead, and the first patrons that Charlie gains for the hotel are Serpentius and Angel Dust, who are respectively an aspiring crime lord and responsible for, and I quote,
turf wars that result in territorial genocide?
And we're led to believe that this kind of thing is pretty normal here. Death and violence are normal. You need to get used to them. However, there's an undercurrent of acceptability to all of this. People don't tend to blink twice about harming others, and while hellborn demons are just implied to be inherently more violent, with sinners it's because they're literally immortal. They can only be truly destroyed by angelic weaponry, and will eventually heal from everything else no problem. And while you'd think that this disparity in the consequences of violence might lead to different attitudes about what's acceptable, it really doesn't. Because again, violence is normal. Or at least that holds true for physical violence. Because if you've been watching these shows carefully, you'll probably notice that while physical violence is so normalized in this world that it's effectively an in-universe punchline, other forms of violence are treated very differently. The sad truth about people is that there are a lot of ways to hurt them, and physical injury can honestly be considered the least terrible way to do it. Verbal, psychological, systemic, sexual, these are all forms of violence that we witness wielded against people in these shows, and it's these forms that tend to be what cross the line, and it's these that I'll largely be talking about. I'll also mostly be talking about Helluva Boss, since we have so much more of that to work with right now, but rest assured I will bring up Hazbin when it becomes relevant. I think the members of IMP actually serve as great examples of mean but not cruel. While murder is literally their job, it should be noted that there is almost never anything personal about it. And aside from when something gets in their way, it's pretty much always done quickly. There isn't much suffering to be seen when they kill someone on the job. They find the target, they kill them, end of story. And strange as it may be, this is part of what allows them to act as a sort of moral barometer for the other characters. And the other part is how they treat each other. We actually see this come into effect as early as Spring Broken in the fight between Blitz and Luna.
Because I adopted you, and that should mean something.
Oh, what does it matter? You're not my real dad. I was almost 18.
It still counts.
Well, it shouldn't. I didn't need you then, asshole. I don't now.
I think it's important to note that Luna almost immediately realizes she went too far and begins to apologize here, because what she said was genuinely hurtful to him. Luna, who spends the majority of her time on screen either injuring or insulting the other members of IMP, realizes she went too far, because despite having the disposition of a rabid chihuahua at a fireworks show, actually hurting the people around her isn't really what she wants. It's actually this exact attitude of not wanting to hurt each other that helps make the group so close-knit. They fight and butt heads and bicker and sometimes threaten to commit horrible crimes on one another.
But if you ever pull a stunt like this again, I will fuck you and your wife.
But they always make sure the other members of the group are okay. I think this is actually best demonstrated in Unhappy Campers, when Moxie and Millie are investigating the summer camp and Moxie's plan doesn't work out, causing him to lash out at Millie.
Those videos have made me some kind of human celebrity.
All week it's been, oh, look at Millard. Isn't he great? Oh, look how talented Millard is. We have a job to do, and you're off dancing for views. Why does it matter so much how these yokels feel about you?
It doesn't. It matters how I feel about myself. And for once, I feel like I'm important. Like I'm somebody to be proud of. And I had hoped that my husband would be there to support me half as much as I've supported him this week.
Millie, I didn't mean...
Save it, Mox!
The moment he realizes he upset her, his anger vanishes, and his only priority is making things right. And you honestly see this sort of thing with each member of the group. Despite his tendency to insult Moxie, Blitz makes sure to tell him how much he relies on him, and Moxie in turn shows great care and respect for Blitz when the time calls for it. Luna still takes the time to diffuse Moxie's mental breakdown. Millie supports Blitz when he's going through his breakup ghost fucking episode and needs help. The list goes on. The 4 members of IMP are their own family unit, often at odds, but incredibly strong together. And the thing is, IMP stands as a juxtaposition to the actual families of the individual members. Millie may be close to her blood relatives, but the relationship is still strained and her parents don't fully support her. Luna didn't even have a family until Blitz adopted her. She was just left to the cruel whims of the system. And both Blitz and Moxie had incredibly cruel fathers that stole their childhoods from them. Crimson was a homophobe who killed Moxie's mother and always made sure that his son was afraid of him. And Cash blatantly despised his own child, selling him for $5 and a condom, and openly wished that Fizz was his son instead. Looking away from IMP for just a moment, I'd actually like to address the cruelty of Stolas' situation. Setting aside our beloved Owl Boy's own daddy issues, Stolas has been subject to some of the worst individual cruelty in the series, which is really saying something. Stella is one of, if not the, most callous and cruel individuals in the entirety of the show. This bitch revels in hurting people, though she takes a special and malicious glee in hurting Stolas. And while she claims that it's because he cheated on her,
I like tormenting you. I want to keep reminding you of what you did.
Let's be honest here, viewer, she's been rotten from the start. Stolas says it himself, he did everything he could to make their house a proper home, but she only ever abused and mistreated him. He's very clearly already suffering from a chemical dependency even before Blitz re-enters his life. She throws a not diverse yet party, doesn't bother to tell him, and then spends it loudly insulting him to her friends. I honestly fucking hate this cunt. She is the nastiest, most self-absorbed, short-sighted, caustic bitch of a character who takes open joy in seeing other people suffer and uses her own daughter as a tool against her ex-husband. She fucking sucks. See, this is what I'm talking about. Stella engages in the nastiest of bullshit and abuse, hiring Stryker, lying to their daughter, and the only person who's ever on her side is Andre Elphys, who's just as big of a bitch as she is, because nobody else would be able to stand her. The world is made worse by her inclusion in it. She is the pinnacle of absolute garbage. Everything Stella does stands in stark contrast to the normal meanness of the denizens of hell, and her scenes are even framed differently to them. Because she's cruel, she exists only to hurt other people in as intimate and horrible a way as possible. And the thing is, it does get worse than her, but that's only because she only operates on the individual level, because she has no greater power than that. What's important to understand is that hell functions on a caste system. There is no social mobility. Demons are assigned an inherent worth at birth and cannot actually gain standing in society. They are doomed to remain where they began forever. And this is something that weighs heavily on the imps in the series, particularly Millie, Blitz and Stryker, because even though it doesn't get brought up all that often, the effect of the suppression of imps is all too evident in the characters. Most imps don't dare imagine that they could have something better. or that they even deserve something better. Millie says this herself when Blitz gets them in the office.
We don't deserve this.
We're just Rathians, Blitz. Muscle. It's all we're good for. All I'm good for. It's why you hired me. Any demon good at making a buck is welcome in lust or greed, but here, demons like us ain't cut out for this.
Fuck you.
Millie is one of the single deadliest individuals in the entirety of the series, fully capable of mowing her way through a small army of demons that would normally be considered her better. But she's so used to being seen and treated as lesser that she's begun to actively view herself as such, and she'd continue to do so if it wasn't for her boss. Blitz is one of the few people who even consider trying to make a better life for themselves, and that's largely because the system is rigged against them. Satan says this himself. He created the imps to serve other demons, and that's the role they're expected to play. The very idea that an imp might try to climb up from the bottom of the heap is enough to warrant killing them. The entire trial is a complete farce from the word go. And just to drive the point home, when Stolas confesses to the alleged crime that Blitz was being arrested for, he gets away with a relative slap on the wrist.
What are you doing?
I mean, aren't you going to, execute me?
Oh, no, of course not. You are a Goetia.
But I committed a heinous crime.
Yeah, you did. But you are demon royalty, so your life has actual worth.
The system itself is rigged and cruel, designed to crush anyone who would rise up against it, and all under the guise of law and justice, just like in real life. It's worth noting that the hierarchy of hellborn demons is similar in function to the sinners versus winners system that governs a mortal soul's afterlife. Sinners are thrown into hell without ever knowing what it was that got them there in the first place. In fact, nobody actually knows what it is that determines what gets someone into heaven or hell, but that actually works just fine for the angels, because it puts them in the undisputable position of being on top. It gives them carte blanche to treat sinners however they choose, and it allows them to remain in power. It's important to realise that while both systems are rigged from the beginning, the system governing mortals is specifically used to justify extermination. The angels don't actually care about redemption because the possibility that a mortal soul could be redeemed would upset the power balance they maintain, and it would also mean that they can't keep slaughtering sinners en masse. This is so objectively cruel, and just as with the Court of Hell, it's properly framed as being the fucked up situation that it is. Adam doesn't just kill sinners because it's his job, it's because he enjoys it.
When all said and done, there's the question of fun. And for those of us with divine ordainment, extermination is entertainment.
He does it because he can. Because it's fun, and Sarah allows it to continue because she's fanatically devoted to maintaining the hierarchy of heaven and hell. She may not kill anyone herself, but she's explicitly complicit in the extermination of mortal souls. It's worth noting that this insanely unfair system has a different effect on different people, and we see the different outcomes of it in the imp characters. Millie becomes downtrodden and accepting of it, only to be broken out of it by Blitz, who imagines a better future, and then there's Stryker, who becomes cruel himself in response to it. This is something I talked about a long time ago in my video on Blitz's relationships, but Stryker's role in the story, aside from looking dangerously sexy, is to serve as Blitz's foil. They're both assassins for hire, both clearly stronger, faster, and more skilled than most other imps. Both are probably of mixed lineage, and both have lost people incredibly important to them, if Stryker's conversation with Stolas is anything to go by.
Some of us have hard lives to live. And some of us have everything we care about taken away by fuckers like you.
But the difference is that Stryker is driven by hatred and pride. He thinks he's inherently superior to the other imps. He enjoys torturing Stolas, and he takes an almost sexual thrill in strangling Moxie. He may be a victim of the system, but he's as cruel as Crimson and twice as proud. However, it's these traits that have led to his repeated defeat. Stryker loses to the members of IMP over and over because they have each other and he has nobody, and his repeated losses slowly drive him crazy as they wound his pride. And even if he did play a part in Blitz's trial, well, Blitz came away from it with both his life and an even stronger relationship with Stolas. So Striker's kind of batting 0 for 4 at this point, and his prospects don't look great because he hasn't learned a damn thing. I do want to stress, however, that Blitz isn't exempt from cruel behaviour. He's had his share of absolute douchebag moments, but the difference is that he learns from them and improves. The biggest example of this is actually found in Apology Tour, and it's all in how Blitz has been handling his relationships. And I am specifically referring to Stolas and Veronica here, not
Fucking Dennis!
or any of the other people obviously just there for fun. I made a whole video on the topic of his relationship with Stolas before Mastermind and Sinsmans came out, so you can watch that if you want a more in-depth analysis there. But the gist of it is that what Blitz said in his fight with Stolas, and what he did to Veronica, the actual reason she fucking hates him, were both cruel. They were horrendously horrible things to do to people. But Blitz does feel bad about it. He realizes that what he did was fucking awful, and he feels bad. He makes an effort to improve and apologize, and that's what sets him apart. It's what allows him to remain a sympathetic character. The difference between doing something cruel and being a cruel person isn't how you handle what you've done. Truly cruel people don't feel remorse. They don't try to right their wrongs or undo the harm they've caused. That's what separates the members of IMP from the villains of the show. Care. They actually care about each other and sometimes even about other people. What's more, caring is what Charlie is all about. She cares about sinners more than anyone else, and her lessons at the hotel are all about teaching the residents to care for each other. They're about teaching people to put aside the meanness and cruelty they've been conditioned into accepting and wielding, and extending kindness and care. And the thing is, she ultimately succeeds. Angel and Serpentius, and even Husk and Vaggie all take her lessons to heart. You watch them grow and mature throughout the season, going from being mean, callous and cutthroat to a tentative family fighting for each other. And it's this growth that people truly form an attachment to. The thing about characters is that it's actually incredibly easy to make people like them. You don't have to make them particularly deep or even sympathetic, you just have to make them enjoyable. If you can make a character fun, you've already done most of the work of getting people attached to them. But in order for people to truly connect to a character, to sympathize with their struggles and want them to be happy despite everything, you need to make them more than just fun, you need to make them sympathetic. You need to give them something that people can relate to on some level. People like characters like Stryker or Adam or fucking Stella. Hell, some people even like Valentino, one of the single most disgusting motherfuckers to leave a trail of degenerate slime across your screen. But they don't relate to them. Unless you're also an abusive fuckwit or want to see them fulfill their goals. You just enjoy the fun times they provide. And that's because cruelty is alienating. It repulses people. Because nobody wants to be able to relate to that. Even though we all know we have the capacity for cruelty, we really don't like to think about it. We don't want to acknowledge that we're capable of being that kind of monster. It alienates us from the characters. We can still enjoy them, but we'll never connect to them on that all-important fundamental level. Meanwhile, characters like Blitz or Angel Dust or Husk or Stolas are all characters we can sympathize with. We can see ourselves in them. We can relate to their struggles, and it makes us want something better for them. Because even when they're mean, well, they're still human. We can see their reason for being mean. We can think about the times that we've been mean and needed understanding because things have made us mean. Because mean is forgivable. Mean is as human as kindness or sorrow. And while we might all have the capacity for cruelty, it doesn't feel human. Because to be cruel is to give in to the absolute worst we can be, to make ourselves lesser, to hurt someone else. And we want to be better, we want to see better. The world deserves better than cruelty, and so do the characters we love. You can forgive someone for being mean, because it's often a product of weakness, of being overwhelmed by the world and our suffering. But we cannot forgive cruelty, because cruelty is what caused that suffering in the first place.